The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke.
Glory to you, O Lord.
The apostles said to the Lord, "Increase our faith." The Lord replied, "If you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you would say to this mulberry tree, 'Be uprooted and planted in the sea,' and it would obey you. Who among you would say to your servant, who has just come in from plowing or tending sheep in the field, 'Come here immediately and take your place at table'? Would he not rather say to him, 'Prepare something for me to eat. Put on your apron and wait on me while I eat and drink. You may eat and drink when I am finished.' Is he grateful to that servant because he did what was commanded? So should it be with you. When you have done all you have been commanded, say, 'We are unprofitable servants. We have done what we were obliged to do.'" The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord.
The prophet Habakkuk is not one in which we very often hear from in the cycle of readings throughout the year, but today we're given this little passage from this obscure, if you will, a minor prophet in the Old Testament. And what he's doing today, he's giving a lament. A lament. Why? How long, O Lord? How long, O Lord, must we endure the violence and the injustice that is heaped upon us? That's his lament. It happens at about 600 years before Christ that he's writing, and the history of ancient Israel was one of turmoil and upheaval oftentimes. It seemed like every time you turned around, another conquering power was coming in and taking over, and there was much destruction and ruin, and so he's lamenting that. God, why are you silent? How much longer do we have to endure this? Well, today we might be tempted to lament as well some of the evil and violence that we have in our own world. We pick up a newspaper, we turn on the television, we're oftentimes confronted with evil and violence, what John Paul II referred to as a culture of death. And we are, as Christians, we need to work to cultivate a culture of life and not of death. This month of October has been designated as Respect Life Month. It has for the last several years, in which we are to reflect a bit on our responsibility as Christians and how we can lift people up, try to focus more in our society and our culture on the dignity of every human life, and how work for ways to make that life more dignified. And we try to do that in many ways. But we, like Habakkuk, sometimes find ourselves lamenting and being frustrated. How long, O Lord, must we endure? Especially for people who work in particular areas of life. People who work, for example, in the pro-life movement, who are trying to extend the legal rights to the unborn, oftentimes feel frustrated. For 40 years after Roe v. Wade, and when the Supreme Court basically cast aside all state regulations and legalized abortion throughout the country through all 9 months of pregnancy, many, many people throughout these 40 years have worked diligently and very hard to try to educate people, to try to change hearts. They go to the marches in Washington, and they try to legislate for changes and laws that would give more legal protection to the unborn. And many times it's a frustrating work. It seems like at every turn there's an obstacle. Another court opinion comes down and strikes it down. And it just goes on. And so if we can be like Habakkuk, wondering, how long, O Lord, must we endure? I think of the frustration, the growing frustration in our country over random acts of violence that we've seemed to kind of just happens more and more as we go through life. We see people being killed in malls, shopping malls, and in movie theaters, and in schools, and grade schools. And we wonder, how long, O Lord, must we endure this? And there's a frustration. We all agree that we don't want to see that kind of violence and evil, but we don't know how to solve it. Not sure what is the best way, the best strategy to fight that. But there's a frustration. In the city of Chicago alone last year, 532 murders. In many other big cities, the numbers are not far behind. And so again, there's a frustration of how do we instill in people a greater sense of dignity for life? I think of people who might work in more international levels, who work for organizations like Catholic Relief Services or the Red Cross or other international agencies that go overseas and they work in areas that are afflicted by war and turbulence. And they're used to seeing tens of thousands of refugees from one country come to another, women and children and old, usually, the elderly. The men seem to be all either fighting or something. And they witness the starvation, they witness the terrible, inhumane conditions that people suffer. And they too wonder, how long, O Lord, before we, as a world with all this, with all our resources, with all the food that we have, why is it that we cannot allocate food and resources to the people who need it the most? So at every level of life, and people who really work hard, and it's their work and their jobs to try to elevate human dignity, they can be frustrated and feel like the progress is at a snail's pace, and how can we move it along? Well, frustration accomplishes nothing and really distracts us from our work. If we get frustrated and quit, that doesn't solve anything as well. You know, I believe it was Mother Teresa that said some years ago that God does not ask us to be successful. He only asks us to be faithful. And that seems to be the sense of the first reading as well. And the Lord answers Habakkuk, don't worry. I will do things in my time. If there's a delay, so be it. I will do it in my time. But be patient. Be patient. And I will triumph, God says to Habakkuk. We too are to remain faithful to our call to try to elevate and instill in others a sense of dignity for every human life from conception to natural death. I was checking out one of these speeches of one of the homilies of Pope Francis last May. He was giving a talk on Pentecost Sunday, and he was talking about the difficulties of the world today, the frustrations that people have in communicating the gospel in a world today that in many ways is quite secular and oftentimes opposed to hearing the gospel message. And he said in the sort of towards the end of that homily that there were two virtues that we really need today, two virtues in promoting the gospel. One was courage, and the other was patience. Courage and patience. When he talked about courage, he was talking about the courage to be a good witness for our faith. You know, he says that people today respond more to witnesses, not necessarily to homilies or to people who just talk or philosophical ideas. People respond more to witness. That's the root word for the word martyr. You all know what a martyr is. People who die for Christ are martyrs. The root word of that means witness. That's what martyr means in Greek, a witness. And we are called to be a witness as well. And the courage to be a good witness to the things that we believe as Christians. And he talked about being patient. The patience. We are not a patient people. We live in a society in which we get very impatient. We get impatient when we stand in line, when we are stalled in traffic, when our telephones don't work and our computers don't work and our car doesn't start. We get very impatient. We're used to that. We're used to things happening very quickly. But again, the Pope is encouraging patience with these things because God does things at a different time frame than what we do. And that's what God basically responds to Habakkuk in his frustration. It will happen in due time. Trust me, that the Lord says. Let me just finish up by just saying a few things that we might do locally that sort of reflect our belief in the life's goodness and the life's dignity and our efforts to improve that. We do have today a life chain going on here in Denison, one in Carroll as well, one here in Denison at 2 o'clock. The life chain, it's an opportunity to manifest our belief in a life's sacredness, even for the unborn, and hoping to change attitudes and hearts. Many people say, well, what good does that do? It doesn't change the law. And you're right, it doesn't change the law, but it may change a heart. And it's a way of witnessing, basically. It's just simply a way of witnessing to what we believe. And by witnessing, it is sometimes a way of changing hearts and changing attitudes in society. So that happens today at 2 o'clock down on Highway 30. That is an opportunity to sort of reflect our values for life. The other thing that I would mention is that this is our month here at St. Rose to collect food for TAP, the agency here in Denison that distributes food and clothing to the needy. And that, again, is an opportunity this month. Many people have already donated. We got some last week, and throughout this month, we'll be collecting non-perishable food items that we will be taking down to TAP every week or so. That is certainly a very concrete and a good witness that we do here in our community. And thirdly, in 2 weeks from today, is World Mission Sunday, which I always like to promote generosity to the missions. This goes to the propagation of the faith. This money is spread out throughout the world, and the money that you donate here in Denison may end up in Africa or in India or in China. It may be able to help build a school. It may help build a clinic. It may help build a church. It may help fund a catechetical center. And it will help people that we will never meet and that we will never know. But when we support things like that, it's a way of showing our solidarity with them, with people who are much poorer than we are. And it shows that we really do want to try to elevate human dignity wherever that is suffering throughout the world. So those are just a few little items, a few little ways that we can do that right here in our own local community. And that we can try to be witnesses for life.